You need someone to come in your house to be a companion, to offer medical care, whether it's permanent or temporary, for one of your loved ones. What would you do? Would you put an ad in the paper? Would you put an ad on Facebook? Or would you go with an agency that is fully accredited? Well, we're going to talk about that today. So if you want to know more, just stay tuned. Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Scan FYI. My guest today is the one and only Howard Stein from Home Helpers. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning, Andrea. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yes, and you know what, Howard? This is really a deceptively simple topic, but I think extremely important. But before we even get to it, in case someone is not familiar with you, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Home Helpers.
Sure. My name is Howard Stein. I'm the owner operator of the Home Helpers in Freehold. We service Monmouth, Mercer, and a little bit of Burlington County. If you need a little bit of TLC in the house, we're the folks that can provide that for you. And it doesn't matter if it's a few hours here and there or something more serious like a live-in or 24/7 care. We do it all and we do it with care and compassion.
I feel like the big thing here is that you're coming into someone's home. And for so many people, well, it's our home, it's our sacred place. All of our stuff is here. And what are your thoughts, Howard, about people who simply they do this? They put an ad on Facebook, they put an ad in a little magazine looking for a companion. There's a lot of things wrong with that, but I'll let you explain.
Yeah, and listen, we aren't here to say what's right or wrong. How I would approach this is there's pros and cons to doing
Okay,
things.
pros and cons.
There's pros and cons to doing things in a variety of ways. I think if you know a person or if you have a person that's recommended, that may be a very valid choice for you. However, working with an agency comes with a laundry list of things that are insurance policies to make sure that what the promise of care is actually what is delivered. Not only that, but there's also a lot of backup and supervision and rules that go along with being an agency providing care. And uh, you know, just on the top, I would say that, insurance is probably one of the most basic and important things. Um, Liability insurance, being bonded, those are assurances that you would not be able to get from a person that you hire,
Right.
privately. I think that's probably one of the most basic protections. But also being an accredited agency means that we have a certain set of guidelines and rules that we follow to ensure that the service that we provided is or provide will provide is going to be of substance and of quality. Okay. First of all, we will only hire a certified home health aide. A certified home health aide is a certificate that's provided by the Department of Nursing. Okay. So they've had a minimum amount of training. When
Right.
someone comes into our office, we interview that person, we screen that person, we do their reference checks, and then we have a very thorough set of background checks that we do on every employee that provides a certain set of confidence in the person that we're hiring. Now, yes, if you're looking to hire someone privately, you can certainly hire someone that has a certificate, but are you able to do the other things, right? And
Probably not. Yeah.
well, you may be able to, or you may not. But those are things that you get when you hire directly. Now, clearly, these some of these other things come at a cost, right? And that's why there is a very kind of wide gap in the hiring of, someone privately versus working with an agency. But again, I think there's a lot of value in that cost difference, especially if you're looking to be more safe and secure.
One of the things that I always think about, because I do know people that have hired, a family member, maybe even a grandchild. And what if that person gets hurt in their home, in your home while they're helping you? I'm thinking you don't really have any recourse versus again when someone is under the umbrella of like a home helpers, an accredited agency, you would have if that person got hurt, they would have recourse. Or if suddenly you found money missing or jewelry missing, because these people aren't bonded or vetted
Right.
necessarily. You're just sort of trusting them.
Yeah, and so that could impact the hiring person, right? Or it could impact the agency, right? And what do I mean by that? If you hire privately and that person falls in your house and actually gets hurt, that
Yeah.
could be a claim against your homeowner's insurance versus if they're an employee of mine working on the job, that would go against my insurance, right? It's a simple thing, but these are not things that people think through when you hire someone. Now, there has been some interesting developments in terms of laws that have come on the books this year with respect to domestic workers. Okay. And there are a very big set of responsibilities that someone that hires a direct, uh, um, uh, a domestic worker has to follow. And if you aren't familiar with it and you have hired someone privately, I suggest you do a Google search on the New Jersey Domestic Workers Bill and make sure that you are up to snuff on that. Now, here's where some of that cost gap now all of a sudden closes, okay? Because one, you are required to have a contract with that person, an employment agreement in writing. You are responsible for payroll taxes for that person. You are now responsible,
Surprise.
right? You are now responsible for workman's compensation
Yeah.
for that person. Guess what? You have to provide 40 days of paid sick leave. What happens if there is, and then it starts to get into some of the other things that you were talking about, like what happens if you require that care, but that person can't come because their kid is sick, right? Or what happens if, all of a sudden they don't show up anymore, right? Then what do you do, right? If you're
Yeah.
working with an agency, we are going to take the point on that and we help resolve those kinds of problems. If you have hired someone privately, you're back to the drawing board, right?
Yes.
So that there's very distinct differences there. When you hire with an agency, these are employees of mine, okay? They are on a payroll, right? They are covered by our insurance. Not only that, but I think one of the biggest benefits of working with an agency is the nursing supervision that comes along with it.
Right.
Okay. It starts with an assessment, and that's a very thorough assessment that's done in the house. It includes a safety inspection of the house. You'd be surprised how many things we find, suggestions that we can make, little improvements that will reduce fall risks, right? Things like that, I think actually have a cumulative effect in the wellness for our clients, right? It's not just the care we're providing. The care that's being provided from the aid is non-medical care, but the supervision is clinical supervision from a registered nurse, and that makes a very big difference. Now, we focus a lot on what we observe with our clients in the house and how that gets communicated back to the nurse. Okay. So, for example, if mom is observed being a little off today, that caregiver is going to call into the nurse and she'll go through a series of questions. Now, maybe it's a UTI. So that nurse could then instruct the caregiver on how to test for a UTI with a simple dip test. Maybe it's something a little bit more complicated, like a pulse ox reading, right? And we look at what the oxygen saturation is. That may be a different set of actions that occur. The point there is that there is someone that that caregiver can talk to,
Right.
and we focus a lot on that. And you'd be surprised how many times we can prevent a hospitalization or an urgent care visit just by good communication between the caregiver and the nurse and being observant and knowing your client. I think that is probably one of the biggest advantages in terms of the differences between hiring with an agency versus, hiring someone privately. And, I want to say that I think there are a lot of good caregivers out there. And I understand why it's done, right? We understand why people want to do it because look, getting quality home care, we know is
It's
not
tough.
it's not inexpensive, right? So we got to try to stretch the budget as best we can, but you also have to understand what you're getting into, and sometimes the cheaper route becomes more expensive in the long haul, right? And the consumer has to be aware of those things. The consumer also has to understand what their responsibilities are. It doesn't end at giving that caregiver, whatever it is. There's other things that come along with it. And I think that the domestic workers bill is just one of those really clear examples where I don't think the public and the consumer really understands what's their responsibility when they're bringing someone into their home. And really, if you kind of do the comparison of things that and services and assurances that you get, it might not be the cheaper option, right, at the end of the day when you think about it. But I think, it's really a case by case, and it's really where people feel comfortable and what they feel comfortable doing and what they don't feel comfortable doing. So there's choices to be made, and my job is to just make sure that people understand both options today.
I can certainly understand where somebody is looking for the less expensive option. I totally get that. But I also agree with you that most people have no idea of the Domestic Workers Act. Not that if I invite you into my home to take care of me, I suddenly am an employer and I have to comply with all these different things. I bet most people don't know that. And the fact that if my caregiver is noticing something is not right with me and they don't have the backup of an agency to go to, that's probably a trip to an emergency room because they're not necessarily in any position to, you know, uh, do the dipstick test for urine or do I have a UTI? Did I forget my meds? Because they don't have a nurse to call.
Right. And I think you actually touched on a great point. So medication dispensing,
Oh, yeah,
right,
yeah.
is not something that a certified health aide is trained and enabled to do, right? Medication dispensing can only be done by a med tech or someone that has a much higher level of education in order to be able to do that, right? So we can send a med tech in, we can send the nurse in to set up medications, but that caregiver really can only do a medication reminder. And that's very different than taking pills out of a bottle. Because, you know, you and I both know that medication adherence is actually one of the top reasons why people get admitted to the hospital. Either they weren't taking their medication enough with the right frequency, or the opposite. They forgot they took their pills
Yeah,
and
too
they're
much.
double dosing or triple dosing, and they wind up in a situation, right? So that is really something that folks, you know, have to try to avoid that situation, right? If you have someone that has a dementia, right? Those are the types of things that I think, again, make a difference in the wellness programs that are being provided. And, you know, at the very basic level, what you get with an agency is with an accredited agency is a care plan that's written by a nurse that aide is then following through, providing feedback on and notes every time they come into the house, right? Whereas, that another situation does not have that level of rigor, follow up, documentation, right? It's a two different things.
So I was initially I said right and wrong, and I was wrong because you're right. How it is pros and cons, and you have to make your own choice. Which of these situations is best for you and your family? But something that Home Helpers provides, an accredited agency provides, there's a peace of mind that is invaluable to people, that the family members of the loved one that you're caring for, because they know that it's not just the person in the house. There's a whole back end to this watching over your situation. That's very valuable. I would say that's very valuable.
Yeah. I always say that there's two aspects of our business. One is the wellness for the client, the other is the peace of mind for the
Yeah,
family. And
yeah,
that's what you are touching on. Often kind of the crisis situation that occurs is when the spouse, a family member is that primary caregiver, and then something happens to them. Right. And what you do in that situation, how the family addresses that, really matters. It is a personal decision and it is about the pros and cons, but you really have to understand what it is that you're getting into. And as long as you understand, you're enabled to make a good family decision. I think, unfortunately, what happens here often it's driven by cost
right.
without understanding the other things that come along with it, right? And so, anytime we can, and this is one of the things that I love about Scan is that you enable and help in that education process by bringing in wonderful vendors that really have the expertise to be able to bring some of these things to light. But the common consumer today, especially with some of the newer things like the domestic workers bill that we were talking about, aren't really aware of them. And this is, the environment that we're in today.
Well, like a lot of times well, why would I be aware of it? It doesn't affect me, but it does, obviously, but it does. I want to just remind everyone who's listening, Howard's phone number is right on the screen. If you want to call him and see what he has to say, of course, you're welcome to do so. And Howard, you're at one of our upcoming Lunch and Learns in March, correct?
Correct.
Correct, March. Oh, it is March. The year is flying by. It is March, and this is a great opportunity to meet Howard in person and get to talk to him. If you have any
Yeah, no,
questions based on this conversation today, it's a great opportunity to hear more about the situation, and because he'll have a little more time to expand on the pros and cons of all of this. But remember, everybody, that peace of mind. How do you put a price on that? You can't.
yeah, I would just say that, if it's not the lunch and learn, then I will be coming back to the scan office or to the church again to do an in-person meet and
Yes.
greet with any of the members, and we love to do that. But if you can't wait, just give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. We're a community-based business, family-based business, and we want to take care of our neighbors. So if you have any questions and we can be of help just answering those basic things, feel free to give us a call.
And if you're considering bringing someone in your home, not using an agency, you might want to read up on what is it, the New Jersey Domestic Workers Bill.
You got
Yeah,
it.
That's yeah, that could potentially that could cost you a lot more. So you want to be super careful. Well, Howard, thank you so much for sharing this information. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Indeed, and I look forward to the next time we get together, Andrea.
So remember out there, if it's important to you, it's important to us. I'm Andrea Tarr, and we'll see you next time on Scan FYI. Bye everyone, and bye Howard.
Bye.